Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Technology Evangelist podcast. I'm Dr. John Fluke, Technology Evangelist, and we are brought to you by Medidenta. They're a direct distributor. They make wonderful products, sell wonderful products. The website is medidenta.com. They've got all kinds of things to help make your practice and your results better, including a full line of 3D printer resins from Rodin. So be sure and check them out. As always, I'm going to ask for likes, subscribes, and comments if you feel, so inclined to make a comment. But that keeps the algorithm happy, helps people find us, and helps get us in front of more eyeballs, which is why we do this. So today, we talk a lot on the podcast about how we do things and how things come to be, and kind of sometimes I like to get the backstories of things and bring people on that haven't always had a lot of exposure. But this is the first time that I've ever really had a chance to do a really good talk with what everybody would call a startup. And what I think is going to be great about today is I've got 4 people here from Kairos, which is an AI company, and they are truly a startup. And these are the kind of things that I think everybody in the profession needs to be aware of, because this is what's coming in dentistry, and this is what's going to change the world. And it's people with ideas and people in the trenches that have the passion to make those ideas come real that change it all for the rest of us. And so I'm excited to talk to them. I think I'm going to start off with Adira, because she is the one who's going to do the origin story. So Adira, do me a favor, wind this back as far as you want. Everybody that watches a podcast knows I tell people my story started when I was 3. So you can go back in time as far as you want, but tell us kind of how you got to where you are and how Kairos got to where they are now.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you so much for having us, Dr. John. We were all really, really excited to be here today. But yeah, I guess kind of rewinding in regards to Kairos and its origin, it really started from my childhood. So I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, so that's South Texas. We're located around 10 to 15 minutes away from Mexico. And my mom has a dental practice there for as long as I could remember. So I spent a lot of my afternoons and a lot of my summers just helping out in the clinic wherever I could. So got to see a lot of the things that would happen essentially behind the scenes instead of, just seeing all the patient side of the experience. And I remember, the front desk, they were constantly juggling different phone calls, scheduling any insurance questions that would come their way, any treatment follow-ups, and also just patients walking in person at the same time. So everyone was always, working incredibly hard, but, there was just so many hours in the day that each of them had to work. So sometimes patients would have to wait for a callback, or it would take longer to get an appointment just because the team was constantly pulled in just so many different directions. And I honestly didn't really think it would turn out to be like a venture one day, but it just really carried those experiences with me forward. So when I got to Rice, I'm currently studying biochemistry and finance, and I always knew I really wanted to work in healthcare. And, around that time, AI started becoming quite capable, and I just kind of kept thinking back to my mom's practice. So met Sanjana Aditya Danush, and that's kind of how we let these conversations just flow between all of us, and just spent a lot of time talking to more dentists, more office managers, and front desk teams all together. And saw that, this was definitely an experience that wasn't necessarily just unique to my mom's own clinic, and we found the same challenges again, like over and over again. Every practice had its own unique workflows, but everyone talked about how much time was spent on those administrative tasks. So that's the origin story of Kairos and how it came to be.
So along those lines, tell me about the name. One of you, I don't know which one of you wants to tell me, but somebody tell me about how you guys came up with the name Kairos, because I like that name a lot.
There, you want to take it? You're the one that came up with it.
Okay, so Kairos
I
basically
love it.
means opportunistic moment.
Yes.
And I think it was also around the same time I happened to be traveling to Egypt, and we went to Cairo, which was the
Okay.
capital of Egypt, and I loved the place. So I don't know, it just felt like a natural fit for it. But
Well,
nothing too serious. It was definitely like the meaning behind it we loved, and then kind of threw it up on in the air amongst like Sanju, Aditya, and Danush, and they all seemed on board with it. So we decided to go with it.
Well, the reason I ask is because after I met you guys, I was like, Kairos, I know that word from somewhere. And I looked it up. And interestingly enough, what I learned was that there's chronos, which is time, but Kairos kind of means like the right time, like the perfect moment. And I was like, well, this is the perfect moment for you guys. And anyway, and I like the little back thing about you went to Cairo because, hey, you know, I've never seen the pyramids, and I want to see the pyramids. I think that would be amazing. I love the old adage that somebody came up with where man fears time and time fears the pyramids. I think that's so cool. Okay, so one of you, now you guys have to pause and figure out which one of you wants to answer this one, but that's okay because that's how we do things. Tell me about what you guys do. What is, I understand administrative piece, but I think a lot of people are like, well, that's a pretty broad subject. So what exactly are you guys working on to bring to dental offices? Sanjana, that's to you. How about that?
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
For like a little bit more background again with Kairos, we really wanted to solve a lot of the repetitive parts of administration that happens in dentistry. And when we say we wanted to solve that, we wanted to make sure that like your dentist, your receptionist, they're having more face-to-face interactions with patients, and they're doing less things that they could automate. And that was our main mission, our core philosophy as we were building it out. So essentially what we take care of is very modular, and it's in three main components. So we start off with being an AI receptionist, so we take in all calls 24/7. So that's anything from after hours, on the weekends, when multiple patients are calling at the same time. We take care of that, and we automate a lot of procedures from scheduling to simple treatment questions as well. And we book directly within your PMS as well. And with the scheduling, one thing that we've seen a lot is a lot of dental clinics operate very differently. So you have people that want to optimize for revenue, people that might want to optimize for certain types of fillings in the morning or certain types of administrative work in the morning. We realized that, one size fits all doesn't really work for scheduling. So we made sure that we built out the actual model to be rule-based and so that it could actually fit within your clinic's workflow. And then after that, we take care of a lot of other administrative parts, mainly being insurance, which we know is the biggest hassle for a lot of different clinics. So we do verification and eligibility so that your receptionists have to spend less time on call with insurance and those things that they have to kind of go through and make sure that each patient is eligible. And we give those verifications and coverages up front.
Okay, because that's important. I've always done the scheduling on, and you guys may have heard this, but it was explained to me as rocks, sand, and water, which is
Right.
if you're going to fill a jar, put the big things in first, then you put the sand, the smaller things, and then the water, the little things. And
Right.
and that works for me. And I'm used to it. But for a lot of people that may not work, and they may be like, no, I only want to do certain things in the morning. So you guys have that ability to do that all, right? No matter how you're scheduling. Do you
Yeah,
do
of
that?
course, and
Is that a parameter that's set up originally? Is that how you do that?
Yeah, I think Danush can walk a little bit more through like the actual tech behind it. But one thing
Okay.
we really saw was that when we started speaking with dental clinics, we realized very quickly that different types of clinics have different values or things that they might be optimizing for. So that's essentially why we decided to come up with the rule-based scheduling. That's something that, Danush can speak a little bit more about.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dr. John, you nailed it on the head. There was one dentist that I spoke to that said he hated doing 3 cleanings in a row. Like that was just
Yeah.
something that he told his front desk to like never schedule in. And so we decided that the system that we wanted to set in place for these rules was to where that you could simply input these in natural language, meaning, the doctor can say, I don't want to do 3 cleanings in a row. And our system will intake that information and map it out to all the different fields that we actually interact with. And when the agent provides schedules to patients, it ends up optimizing for what was given.
That's huge. You know, one of the things that I have always found kind of interesting about dentistry, especially like single location or maybe a couple of locations, is that as the doctor, we kind of get to set kind of all the things around us. It's like our own little kingdom. And we don't like being changed or forced to change very much because of that. I think we all, I've called my own shots for 10 years. I don't want a computer calling the shots for me. So I like the fact that it actually works with you to give you what you want, because one of my key phrases that I tell people is the technology should work for the doctor, not the doctor who works for the technology, because that's when things are primitive, often that's kind of what you have to do. But then when things go mainstream, that's when that comes along. I also I want to talk about just my personal philosophy on AI for a second, which is you mentioned a second ago about how there's all these repetitive tasks, and that's, to me, that's the real shining moment for artificial intelligence, is that, and here I'm sure you know this because you grew up in a dental office, but it's a relationship business. People don't come in because of your decor. I mean, it may help, but they come in because they've got a relationship with the doctor, the dental assistant, the hygienist, the front desk. And it's those relationships that really drive everything. And what I want to see AI do is free up these mundane tasks that take time, that then give people the time back to interact with the patients and drive the relationships. So I'm not sure which one of you wants to handle this, but in addition to like scheduling, voice, insurance verification, do you guys handle anything else in that regard?
Yeah, so in addition to those things, we also handle the other side of the coin, which is patient recall, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
a lot of clinics, they're able to get the patients to call on the phone, get them booked, but how do they actually get them to come to their door? And so we work on basically using automated SMS reminders to remind them of their appointments, every 6 months, sending out intake forms as well, and just making sure that when they get through the door, the process is as smooth as possible, in addition to the actual intake question too.
So that's beautiful. I will use a personal story today. I got a haircut today, and I was walking out and I scheduled my next haircut. And one of the problems that I personally have, and I know a lot of patients do, is actually getting stuff into your phone. I always fat finger it. It's either an hour ahead, an hour behind, or a day off somewhere. I made the appointment literally 10 seconds after they set the appointment. My phone dinged. It was like, yeah, put that on my calendar. Boop. Goes right into the spot that it's supposed to go. I don't have to worry about it. And that communication thing is huge. Filling your schedule, having, one of the worst nightmares in dentistry is you have a large procedure. Your office opens at 8, your 9 o'clock large procedure calls at 8:10. I just had a meeting, I can't make it. And the ability to reach out and go, find a patient that needs something that will fill this slot. And that's kind of where you guys are really coming into your own, right, with doing things like that. So, all right, so tell me, if this is cool, because this is the first time I've ever had 4 faces besides mine on the screen. So tell me, who wants to tell me, how'd you guys meet? Which one of you wants to tell that story? Because I think this is a good thing for people to know.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that one. So,
okay, yeah, go ahead.
Sanjana. Yeah, so for context, me and Aditya go to Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and Adira and Sanjana go to Rice University in Houston. And so the bridge between us is that me and Sanjana are from the same hometown. So we knew each other beforehand. And so when we both went off to our respective colleges, Sanjana met Adira and became good friends with her freshman year. And then Aditya and myself became good friends freshman year. And so, we kind of just like had some connections that way. And, we learned that Adira's mom was a dentist and they were interested in building something. And we were interested in building something, and then we like combined forces. So it's a pretty cool story.
So you guys are still in Georgia, right? Or are you on somewhere else now?
Yes, so we're actually based in Houston. The start
Okay.
in Houston because we're doing a program at Rice right now.
Okay, so you're at Rice as well. Okay. But I think that's just such a great thing about the world we live in, that people can instantly communicate with one another and then come together with these kind of ideas. I often think about, can you imagine if like the great thinkers, in the past, like if Newton had been able to reach out to all his peers, and, like communicate with them instantly, how much further ahead that we would be. So you guys are a startup, and there's gotta be a lot of late nights and a lot of hurdles to do this. So I'm not sure which one of you wants to answer this one either, but kind of tell me about some of the hard things about being a startup, because I know dentistry is kind of an interesting animal in that a lot of dentists have ideas for different things, and they kind of muddle around and sort of wonder, where do I go? What do I do? And you guys kind of came at it from the outside because you knew a dentist. But tell me some of the things that you've battled as you've gotten Kairos off the ground.
Yes, I think one of the most difficult parts is definitely getting our message out there, right? We've built the product, we know it works, but how do we get the dental community to understand, the value it provides, right? And so one of the things we've done to sort of address that challenge, especially this summer, now that we're all in person together, is actually driving to different clinics, meeting these dentists and office managers face to face, giving them donuts and having good conversations where we can just learn more about what they want out of the product. We can learn more about how we can deliver value to them and just set up relationships like that.
What I think is neat about this whole thing is I remember when I first started with a practice management system. We went to digital charting in 2000, which was probably before any of you were born, which is kind of frightening, actually. But anyway, back then, the company that I was using had 35 employees, and I literally could pick up the phone. In fact, one time I did. I actually picked up the phone and I called one of the programmers I knew, and I said, "Can you build a time clock into this thing?" And they were like, "Yeah, we can do that." And a couple of days later, I got an update, and it had a time clock in it. So are you guys, like, so you're still taking suggestions from users and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, of course. I think anytime you're building a product, especially when it's early stages, it's very, very important to take into consideration what your first 10, 20 customers are saying, because that's what really shapes who your ideal customer is, and it also shows like the future projection of what your product could look like and what could help like. And we had the in that we originally had with one dentist with Adira's mom, but we knew that it may not fit just for her. It could fit with a lot of other dentists, and they have different needs. Like you mentioned, we do give our personal phone number to every clinic that we onboard. We've gone in person for a lot of onboardings as well, especially in the Houston area. We drive there, we try to onboard immediately. In Nashville, we've onboarded a couple clinics as well that we've gone in immediately and done it there. And I think it's really important to build those relationships because they know that they can always message us within the Slack channel and they'll get a response back within 24 hours, usually much faster than that, and that will be able to fix any of those things that they might have that they can't really get through for a team that's a lot bigger or a lot more corporate.
Well, and that's the reason I asked that is the other side of that story was, I won't mention the company, but the PMS system that I was using, they were bought by a big corporation. And a couple of years later, I called the same programmer, and I said, hey, I need whatever it was. And he was like, I'll have to call you back. And I was like, okay. And he called me back like 5 minutes later from his mobile in the parking lot. And he said, it's not like that anymore. I can't do those things. We have to have committee meetings, and we have to have surveys and all these other things to make changes. I think this is one of the super cool things about dealing with companies that are startups is big ships turn slowly and little ships turn on a dime. And that gives you guys that nimbleness to be able to turn things, to change things. Let me ask you this. Which one of you is the business brains behind this? Like the accountant, for instance. There's got to be one of you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm majoring in finance as well, so that automatically comes down to me. But I think in general, like having a small team, what we've realized, and especially since we're all students, we all have to kind of dabble into multiple roles. So
Right.
even this summer, the Nushan at the Dare is helping a lot with going out to these clinics and helping onboard a lot of these while also focusing on the tech side. And we've had to do the other way around. But yeah, definitely a mix of all of us.
Well, and that's the thing is there's so many, like just to start a business, there's so many, steps that you go before you can actually even go out and say, hey, let's, we've got this thing, let's sell it. There's all these little things that you've got to go through. And I love that you guys are, once again, the word nimble enough that you can go in and do these things. Where do you see this going? What's the master plan for what you're going to do? Do you really know yet?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think in general, our vision has been pretty consistent since day one itself. We really want this technology to kind of fade into the background of a lot of these dental clinics, so that way dentists like my mom can just focus on what they were trained to do, but just help treat these patients.
Right.
And I think if you look at a typical day in a practice, right, there's just so much time spent on these phone calls and other administrative tasks. So I think that those things are all pretty important, but they also take away time from patients. And if we can essentially handle more of that behind the scenes, like I mentioned before, then it gives the practice a lot more flexibility. So maybe that means, fitting in another patient who needed to be seen, or maybe that also means just spending more time with like a patient they already had scheduled in. I think maybe, I think like just like longer term, if we look at it out in a couple of years, we'd love for Kairos to become a trusted partner for a lot of these practices across healthcare in general. And we really started in dentistry because that's where the story began for a lot of us and what we understood best in terms of like workflows. But as we continue learning, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to help other healthcare specialties as well, facing a lot of the similar administrative burdens.
So let me ask you this. You guys have, basically I would say that, and I don't think any of you, I don't think would disagree, you kind of grew up digital. The internet thing was already big. You were already, texting and all that kind of stuff. The generation that I come from, a lot of fear of rapid progress in people. Have you guys seen a lot of, or I don't want to say pushback, but like, do people like greet this concept with open arms, or are they more hesitant where they're like, no, wait, even though you guys know it works? For people that are maybe like 45, 50, do you see any hesitation in that and more acceptance by people like in their 30s and early 40s?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head, to be honest. There is definitely a large pool of dentists, right? And, you get a lot of our like interested customer pool, which are the younger dentists, maybe the ones that have recently acquired and are helping and are hoping for rapid practice growth. maybe they're getting a lot of new patients and they're unsure of how to handle all that. And so they see a technology that's pretty lucrative and they understand the value of it. But at the same time, especially when we're going in person or meeting these dentists at conferences, you'll also get those dentists that have been practicing for 30, 40 years, are on their way out of retirement, that have an established practice space. And so, naturally there may be some, it's like stick to the books, right? Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's usually what they like to practice. And so for those clinics specifically, a lot of the time we tell them that, the main reason, like we emphasize the point that, we want you guys to focus on dentistry, which is what you have been practicing for 40 years. And especially recently, dentistry has turned into a big business industry, right? You have to be sure that your practice is staying afloat, because a competitor can come down right across the street and maybe take away a lot of the patients that you had developed relationships with. And so for these practices, it's understanding that, okay, this tool is simply going to be an aid to help you do what you love.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is so important, is that this is a tool. It's not a replacement. I'll tell you a story. When we first embraced patient communication, I don't even know what year it was, but it was a while back. So we had a staff meeting, and I talked about that we were going to start to confirm with text messages. And it was a lunch meeting, and after lunch, I had a team of 3 administrators that worked the front and greeted patients and everything. And one of them was a very sweet gal in her mid-20s, and she was so good with people. And we finished the meeting, and she came into my office, she shut the door, and she broke in just sobbing. And she was like, "You're going to fire me." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "This is going to do what I do. What am I supposed to do now? You're going to fire me." And I said, "No, what you're going to do is what you already do, only you're just going to do it with people face to face. You're not going to talk to people on the phone anymore. When people come in, you're going to be the one that gets them a cup of coffee. You're going to be the one that talks to them about, the financial part of it or whatever." And I don't see things like this really moving people. It's not like, oh, you can cut your payroll and lose 2 employees. What I really see is you're going to become more financially viable, because you're not spending all this time spinning your wheels in the paperwork muck, that you're going to interact more with the patients, let the people form those relationships, and then reap the benefits of that. And that's kind of what I'm trying to tell people about what I think AI is going to do.
For sure. And I think even like what you said, like there's a lot of times we've gone into clinics firsthand and we've had to wait there because they were taking the calls, and there's a lot of patients that are just sitting in the waiting rooms that don't get the greeting or that like warm intro before they go into the dentist, and they're just sitting waiting for paperwork. So we really want to take care of that part, so your receptionist or your front desk is doing a lot more of what builds relationships with patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget, I walked into an office one time that I had an appointment for, and they weren't digital. And I walked in and on the phone, and I got this. You wait, I'm on the phone. She hung the phone up, the phone rang, she picked the phone up. I kind of looked, and she looked at the phone, looked at me, and went, "No." Wanted to make sure I didn't have my sign upside down. Anyway, and then I was like, "Really? I'm standing right?" I don't know. It just kind of miffed me, because I'm like, "I'm right, you can see me. They can't you just say, 'Please hold'?" But that's the niche that all of this is going to fill. So, Tanush, what is your your degree in? What are you studying?
Yeah, I'm studying computer science right now.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we got computer science, we've got business and bio. Sanjana, what are you studying?
Neuroscience.
Okay, that's okay. And then Dacia, what are you studying?
I also study computer science.
Okay, okay. So you guys, let me ask you this about computer science because I'm kind of curious. Was when you guys started in this, was AI already like, oh yeah, that's what we want to study, or have you seen this build in the time you've been in school?
It's definitely built a lot in the time we've been in school. I'd say when we first started college and even in late high school, it was a much more primitive technology, right? And I think we've rapidly seen just how much is being integrated in every single product you use today. And I think that's what I find very interesting about it because computer science is cool, right? And you can make software, but I think what AI really enables you to do is transform other industries, right? Dentistry doesn't have much to do with computer science, but then using this AI, it almost creates a paradox where you're using this technology to make dentistry almost less about the technology, right? And more so about the in-person profession and
Uh,
interactions you have there. I think that's just what makes computer science such a good combination with this.
well, and it's interesting to me because so the first time I saw AI in dentistry was in 2016, and I met with a couple of guys who were a startup, and they were working on X-ray interpretation, and that was the first time I'd ever seen that. Okay, I can write a little bit of computer code, but I am not like, especially now, I'm not code competent at all. And so I asked him, I was like, okay, and I tried to get into the nuts and bolts of it, and they might as well have been speaking, Mandarin to me because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to grasp this. But I was like, okay, this is going to have its place. And then what I thought was really funny was that the radiographic companies came along. A lot of them launched in like 2021, maybe late 2020. And then all of a sudden, one day, I think it was in like February of 22, I think it was, ChatGPT went live. And then it was suddenly like every website, every news site you went to or whatever, every billboard, seemed like AI was everywhere. And then suddenly we've just seen this massive influx of this thing. And the interesting part to me is it was building all this time, but it's just weird to me that only people in the tech industry really knew what was coming, and that's it just kind of floors me because it's like boom, there's this huge thing and it's everywhere and it works. And I think in a way it's been a little intimidating to people because they've been like, wait a minute. And you see news stories that say, oh my gosh, there's this employment apocalypse coming. And yet somebody told me the other day, which I think was really interesting. They said AI is not going to replace that many people. What it's going to replace is the people that refuse to use AI. And I liked that expression because I think it really goes into this whole dental thing we're talking about, relieving the burden and making it relationship built. So let me ask you, Tanush, where do you see, this is one of these stupid things that people ask me sometimes, so I don't expect you to get it right, but where do you see this in 5 years?
Yeah, totally fair point. And, I think one of the things that you just said was that it can be very intimidating, right? Because this tech is moving so fast. Like,
Yeah.
if we see where, for example, something like ChatGPT has come in just under 4 years, especially as a developer, it is mind boggling. And, I think we've seen this much progress in 4 years, but I think within the last year or so, it has really, really become not just these foundational models, but how you can apply these foundational models to parts of life. And so that's something like that's exactly why Kairos, the opportune moment, is right now, because it's been this era of voice AI has really gotten good enough to take care of patients, to talk to people and sound great. It doesn't make them feel like that they're talking to anyone inferior. And so this technology has really gotten good over the last year. And so in 5 years, I'm very excited to see how it can transform what we're doing at Kairos. And so I expect, especially within dentistry, the adoption of AI in patient intake and x-ray, like charting and recall, all of these facets of dentistry to truly expand. And I think if you sample a clinic, like 10 clinics in a row on a street, I'd say there's a good chance 8 or 9 of them are using AI in some capacity.
And I think that's huge because, like anything that I've ever seen in tech, if you don't embrace it, you end up getting left behind. And I think what people are really going to see with things like what you all are doing is that you mentioned earlier that, if a new practice opens and they begin to take patients, I would be just as concerned about somebody implementing a system that frees up their staff, that allows them to have more in-person interactions, and somebody changes offices because, well, every time I go in there, there's somebody on the phone and they're holding their finger up, saying just a minute, as opposed to, hey, let me ask you guys this about the voice system, because I'm kind of curious. Does the phone even ring in an office now, or is that just all handled in the
The
cloud?
phone doesn't even ring.
Okay.
So what we set up is that there's an automatic forwarding. So when that phone is supposed to ring, it instead calls the other, like Kairos phone number, right? And then it'll only go to the front desk if it gets forwarded to that. So it's almost like an invisible presence in the office.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. And, one of the other things that I think is really cool about that is, Tanush, you said it, where it's like it's indistinguishable from a human being. People can't, it's not like they're, like they can't talk to it. It won't do what they want it to do. It does all that. I've been in offices in the past where the rule was the phone cannot ring 3 times. Because, if it rings 3 times, the person on the other end is going to think that they're too busy to talk to me. I've heard that philosophy before. But with this, it's like no matter what time the phone rings, no matter how busy the people are, no matter if somebody's sick, the phone gets answered and the problem gets dealt with. The appointment gets made, even if it's in the middle of the night. And I think that's pretty amazing. Do you guys have any numbers, just out of curiosity, like how many people schedule in the middle of the night? Do you have any? I'm just curious if you guys even have a gut feeling on that. There's a reason why I'm asking this. I'll tell you in a minute. I don't know if either one of you computer science guys look at that and even know. But if you do, let me know. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, for sure. We take a good look at the metrics because, again, that's, the value of the product. And
Sure.
we noticed that we get a lot of appointments booked right after work. So maybe around 6 o'clock, around 7 o'clock, when these, working individuals have come home, have kind of reunited with their family, and then they're talking about maybe at dinner, I think, the son has an appointment or needs to get a cleaning, so let's book him in for next week. But traditionally, obviously offices would be closed, and so they would have to wait until the next morning. And so that's typically where we've seen the greatest improvement.
Okay. The reason I ask is when we started offering online payments, one of the things that shocked me was how many payments that our office got at 2 a.m. And the only thing I could think of was that, somebody would be asleep and they'd wake up and they'd be like, geez, I can't go back to sleep. I got to do something. I'll go pay a couple of bills. And they would go down to their computer and, pay invoices or whatever. But it was pretty shocking to me. And I think having that convenience of handling those kind of things whenever somebody wants, and knowing that it's taken care of, knowing that, if somebody calls first thing in the morning and cancels, the system's already known that the 8 o'clock person has moved off. It's already moving to fill that spot before Susan comes in at 7:45 and realizes, oh my gosh, they left a message. The hygienist is sitting now because I can't get anybody in 15 minutes. We've all seen that. It just seems like kind of a no-brainer that people would be looking at this to me. So in your mom's office, did you see her, like, did she encourage you in this at all, just out of curiosity? Did she, like, somebody's got to fix this because this isn't, I'm frustrated. So did she inspire you to kind of do any of this or start this?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So she definitely encouraged all of us, but also kept all of us quite grounded, I guess, like throughout the entire process. So since she runs her own office like by herself, she wasn't necessarily interested in any form of flashy technology that would be complicated for her to handle.
Right.
But she cared a lot about whether or not it would actually help her team and help her patients at the end of the day. And I think in the beginning, she'd point out things happening throughout the day that we really had to think about quite early on. So, like, if a patient had a particular question or the front desk ran into a workflow issue, she'd say, have you ended up thinking about this, or how would Kairos essentially handle that issue? So I think having that perspective has been incredibly valuable because, she's lived through these challenges every single day, and she wasn't just, cheering us on as my mom, but she was actually giving us actual practical feedback as a practicing dentist. And I think a lot of that feedback has shaped the product to what it is today. And of course, like, her being my mom, I can always call her up at any moment of the night to basically answer any form of questions we might have on the tech side as well. So it's definitely been a game changer in getting our product up and off the ground.
So you brought something up that I want to follow up on, which is implementation, because you talked about, like, your mom doesn't need anything flashy. She doesn't need anything that's going to be a distraction. And one of the things that I know about dentistry is that it's really important to not make massive changes to the workflow. Because if people start struggling, there's two things that happen. Number one, if people start struggling, they get frustrated. But the other thing is, when they struggle, the first thing they do is, after they struggle, is they say, I'm just going to do it the old way. It's just better to do it this way because that's the way I know. So how does the training work when somebody does, like, Kairos onboarding? How do you guys do that?
Yeah, so all those points are very valid, and that's why we actually design our software the way we do. So the way it works is, really, you just forward your phone line to our phone number, and then we install a piece of software to help us with integrating with the PMS system, right? But the actual dashboard we deliver to customers is very simple to use, and it's really a one-time setup. You kind of set up the rules you want, right? The natural language we talked about before about specifically defining how you want your appointments to be arranged. And just different things like, what phone number you want to use, administrative stuff. But after that, they don't really have to touch it much at all, other than reviewing call transcripts. And so this way, there isn't really much training involved at all, and you can kind of continue with how you generally go about your day, other than the fact that you're not really taking the calls or scheduling appointments manually. And so I think that's the benefit of the software, because you don't really have to learn a new software.
Okay. And then, obviously, if you get it set up and then you realize, wait a minute, I set it up and I made a mistake, or I've decided to change something. I mean, it's just a matter of updating a change to that, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You can customize it through settings. If there's bigger, like, workflow things as well that you're interested in, again, they all have our numbers. They all have a Slack channel with us, and so we can build it out for them.
Okay. Because that's one of the things I would think about is, somebody gets it set up and it's running just fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've added another hygiene chair or whatever, and it's like, okay, what do you do now? Because it's running just fine if you've got 4 ops and it's running just fine with 4, but suddenly it's like, I need to add a 5th because these kind of things happen, or you have maternity leave, you have people get sick, you've got vacations, all of these kind of things you've got to work around. which is also nice to have a system that you can do that with, because it can compensate for that without somebody actually having to remember to compensate for it, because computers don't forget. I think there's something to be said for that as well. Do you guys, anybody know how much time an office saves when they're doing things like insurance verification, for instance? You guys happen to notice like how much employee time that might save? I know that's kind of a nebulous question, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's definitely quite hard to put a single number on it because
Yeah.
every practice is different. So
Right.
some offices we've talked to and have onboarded with us have one front desk coordinator, others have three or four. So I think all of their workflows vary quite a bit as well. But what we consistently hear throughout the entire process is that it's not, one task that's overwhelming. It's kind of the constant switching between these tasks. So
Okay.
someone starts, verifying insurance, and then the phone rings, and then a patient walks in, and then another patient comes in who has a billing question. And before you know it, they're just juggling all these different things all at one time. So I think, our main goal is to take, again, some of those repetitive administrative tasks off their plate altogether, which is what we've been ultimately able to do with Kairos. And I think as we continue working with more practices, we'll be able to quantify those time savings a little bit more precisely. But right now, we're really focused on building something that genuinely fits within each practice's workflow and makes the day run a lot more smoothly.
Well, what I notice about myself is I will sit down in the morning to do something, and I open my email, and then there's a critical email at the top of the inbox. Like, okay, I got a project to do, but I'll deal with that first. Then I get a text message, or something else comes in, and then you end up, maybe it's just because I'm scatterbrained, but I'll end up having to do 2 or 3 things before, and then I'm like, okay, what was the important thing that I had to do? And I know this happens in dental offices, where it's like, did you do this insurance verification? Oh my gosh, I was going to do that. And then the phone rang, and then, little Susie threw a fit in the reception room, and I had to help her mom. And oh my gosh, no, I didn't get to that. And so having this, being able to do that and just keep people focused on, one task at a time, because we're running like, 10,000-year-old software up here, and we're running state-of-the-art software everywhere else, and we don't multitask nearly as well as machines do. Computers don't forget, they just run routines, but I can't run a routine to save my life. Now, maybe that's just me, but I would think if I was running the front desk, I would love to have something that was handling all of this. So on the insurance verification side, how actually does this work? Somebody calls and they have, XYZ insurance. Do they tell the voice agent, and then the agent actually goes out and verifies? Is that how it's done? Or?
Yeah. So good question. Basically, the insurance is pretty customizable per practice. And so some practices want eligibilities done right on the call. Some practices want, batch eligibility checks like a week before all their patients
Sure.
come in. And so we use a pretty good clearinghouse that actually returns their eligibility status within seconds. And so if I'm a new patient
Love
and I
it.
call our system and mention I had United Healthcare Dental with this member ID, then
Right.
our system will actually process that eligibility within seconds, and it'll inform the staff if they are or if they're not eligible. And the cool thing is, in cases that they are eligible, it's even able to provide cost breakdown and some specific benefits when that's available.
See, that's crazy, because one of the things that happens, and I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but patients expect an office, and here you probably know this just from hanging out in your mom's office, but patients expect the office to know everything about every insurance policy on the planet. And being able to access things like that will give you the information so that you've got it in front of you is incredibly important because it helps with billing. It helps not make mistakes on things. It helps not scheduling people that aren't covered under that particular office. Your office is out of network or something like that, because those kind of things happen and those can be nightmares. And that's just one more thing to deal with. So do you guys, if people want to get a hold of you guys and check this out, how do they do that?
Yeah, of course. So the way that you can contact us is we have our website, which is kairoshealthai.com. So that's spelled Kairos, healthai.com. And we respond to all demo requests there. You can book a 15-minute demo. That's typically our process to show the clinic how we work within their workflows. And we also have all of our contact information on there if there's any emails or things that they would like to talk a little bit more about. But usually we just say to book a demo just because we can really customize it and walk through your specific process on that.
Okay, and you can like handle all their questions at that point in time and sort of bring them
Yes.
up to speed on what Kairos can do.
Yes,
Okay.
and our demo only takes about 5 minutes with another extra 10 minutes to like walk through the process and give a little bit more context in terms of pricing. So that's usually the best place to just go through any sort of questions.
Okay, and you guys can work with single offices, multi-location practices, DSOs, the whole shebang, right? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, super cool. So it doesn't matter what kind of office you've got. Specialty offices too, I would take it, correct? I'm an orthodontist, I'm a periodontist, it doesn't really matter. It's all ones and zeros to you guys, so.
Yes,
All
that's
right.
correct.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for spending the time with me. I am really grateful. Anything that any one of you want to leave, anything that we didn't mention or cover that you want to make sure that people know about Kairos? Because if we've covered it all, that's fine. But I just don't know. You want to close it, Tanish?
No, I was going to say, John, you did a great job. I think, we talked a lot about Kairos' capabilities. And so, to all the dental clinics that are watching this, I would highly recommend chatting with us. We would love to walk through how Kairos can help you guys and, how much of a time saver it can be for your practice and help you get to what you're doing best, which is cleaning those teeth, talking to patients, and doing the whole process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you think that you'd like your front desk to be less busy and be more involved with your patients, then call these people. It's that simple. I can't ask every question that every office is going to ask. I try and ask the ones that I think the majority of us would like to know, but specific things, do a demo, find out for yourself. One thing I can tell you for sure is I've known this group for a while, and they are some hardworking and energetic people, and I know that they can help you. So I'm going to wrap up, folks. This is the Technology Evangelist Podcast. I'm Dr. John Fluke, Technology Evangelist. We're brought to you by Medidenta, a supplier that sells direct to offices. They've got all kinds of great stuff, including the entire rodent resin line for 3D printing. Patronize them, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do this. And as always, like, subscribe, comment. I'm a slave to the algorithm. So until next time, thank you for watching.